Have you ever heard words so heavy that they feel like they could crack the earth beneath your feet? There are moments in history where it's not the bombs or missiles that start wars, it's the words. Words thrown into microphones, broadcasted across the world, shaking nations, shaking homes. Trump threatens to kill Iran's leader, Ali Khamenei, and demands unconditional surrender. Have you ever wondered how much power one sentence can carry when it comes from the mouth of a world leader? Because it's not just a sentence, it's not just a soundbite. It's a force, a ripple that can become a wave, a whisper that can become a war, a phrase spoken on a podium somewhere far away that finds its way into living rooms, hearts, and headlines across the world. That's the weight of words. When ordinary people speak, they may change a room, but when leaders speak, they can change a nation or a people. They can change a mind. They can set a tone. A powerful sentence that will change the world. That's the weight of words. When ordinary people speak, they may change a room. But when leaders, they can change history. One press conference, one statement, one impulsive tweet, one miscalculated threat, and suddenly millions are affected, markets shake, borders tense up, families start praying, and these nations begin to wonder if peace is slipping through their fingers once again. That's the kind of world we live in today, a world where diplomacy is sometimes drowned out by drama, where threats travel faster than truth, where leaders forget that their microphone isn't just for their people, it echoes across the world. It's so easy now to say things without realizing their full effect. To throw around words like war, kill, or surrender, like they're just part of a political strategy. But these aren't just words. These are triggers. These are sparks in rooms already filled with gasoline. And it scares me sometimes because the more powerful a person becomes, the more they seem to forget how fragile peace really is. Peace doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to be loud. But war begins in the noise. War begins in careless phrases, in aggressive tones, in ultimatums and chest thumping. And it's strange, isn't it? How a single sentence from a leader sitting safely behind a desk can send soldiers to the front lines. How a threat made during a speech can keep entire nations awake at night. How a demand for unconditional surrender can be interpreted as a declaration of domination, not just over politics, but over people. There is something sacred about language, something delicate. And when someone has power, their words carry more than just weight, they carry consequence. That's why leadership is not just about making bold decisions. It's about having the wisdom to speak carefully, to understand the responsibility that comes with every word, every statement, every pause. Because behind every policy, there are people. Behind every border dispute, there are children. Behind every press release, there are prayers. And maybe we forget that because we don't see them. We don't see the mothers clutching their babies a little tighter, the sons saying goodbye to their fathers, unsure if it's their last, the young girls whose dreams are interrupted by air raid sirens and sirens of fear. Words can build nations, and they can destroy them too. And that is why I believe the greatest strength a leader can have today is restraint. Not everything needs to be said just because it's true. Not every emotion needs to be broadcast. Not every conflict needs a threat. Sometimes the strongest man in the room is the one who stays silent while others shout. Sometimes the real power lies in asking questions instead of giving commands. And sometimes the most powerful sentence a leader can say is, Let's talk. We need more of that. Not weakness, not submission, but courage. The courage to choose peace over pride, because pride can start wars, but humility can prevent them. And I know the world is complicated, that politics is messy, that trust is broken, that peace doesn't come easy. But maybe it starts with tone, with timing, with a choice of words. Maybe it starts with remembering that while wars are fought on battlefields, they begin in boardrooms, in statements, in interviews. That's where we lose or preserve peace. The world today is listening more than ever. Every press conference is recorded. Every phrase is dissected. Every tone is analyzed. So my prayer is that those who have the most influence also have the most reflection. I hope the next time a leader steps onto a stage, they realize the gravity of the moment, that they hold more than a mic in their hand. They hold lives, futures, hopes. And I hope they remember that when they speak, they're not just talking to allies or enemies. They're speaking to us. All of us, the ones who live under their decisions, the ones who carry their words into our realities. Because in the end, history remembers speeches. It remembers threats. It remembers what was said and what wasn't. So may we use our words, not as weapons, but as bridges. May we learn to weigh them not just with our minds, but with our hearts. Because words can shake the world, but they can also save it. It sounds strong, final, powerful. It sounds like something out of a war movie, like a phrase written on a document at the end of a long battle. But when you stop and think about it, what does it really mean? To surrender without conditions means to give up everything. To lay down arms, dignity, control, and even the right to negotiate. It means there's no room for conversation, no space for understanding, only submission. And that in itself is a dangerous place to stand in as a world, because when one side demands everything and the other is left with nothing, that's not peace. That's silence through fear. It's easy to say unconditional surrender when you're the one with power, when you're the one calling the shots, holding the mic, standing behind walls of protection and privilege. But what about the people on the other side of that demand? The ones whose lives are tied to a flag they didn't choose. The ones who will face the cost of decisions made in offices they'll never step foot in. When you ask for unconditional surrender, you're not just asking for weapons to be dropped. You're asking people to forget who they are. You're asking a nation to erase its history. You're demanding that fear wins and dignity disappears. And that's not peace. That's control dressed up as resolution. True peace doesn't need to humiliate someone into obedience. It doesn't need to crush the spirit of a people just to prove a point. Peace, the kind that lasts, the kind that heals, is built on dialogue, on empathy, on respect. But when power is used as a weapon, not a responsibility, words like unconditional surrender become tools of destruction, not restoration. And it breaks my heart. Because while these statements are being made in conference rooms and through press briefings, ordinary people are the ones who suffer. Families who just want to eat dinner in peace. Children who don't understand why sirens keep waking them up in the middle of the night. Fathers who don't know if they'll come home the next day. These are the lives that hang in the balance. Is it really strength to force someone to kneel? Or is it strength to reach across the divide and say, let's find another way? The truth is, demanding unconditional surrender isn't about ending war. It's about winning a fight. But if winning means losing our humanity, then what have we truly gained? Power without compassion is hollow, and peace without justice is an illusion. So when leaders stand tall and speak about victory through surrender, I hope they remember that real leadership isn't about forcing others to their knees. It's about lifting people up. Maybe the goal shouldn't be total submission. Maybe the goal should be mutual understanding. Not agreement on everything, but agreement on one thing, that life is too precious, too sacred to be used as a bargaining chip. Some of the greatest moments in history didn't come from domination, they came from reconciliation, from people who chose grace over greed, humility over hatred, peace over pride. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to negotiate with people you don't trust. It's hard to sit at the table with someone who once called you the enemy. But peace was never supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be worth it. Unconditional surrender might end a war on paper, but it doesn't end the fear in people's hearts. It doesn't end the bitterness that festers after dignity is taken. It doesn't rebuild the homes or the trust or the bridges that were burned. What if we stopped demanding full surrender and started asking for shared courage? Courage to listen, courage to see the humanity on the other side, courage to stop the cycle before another generation has to suffer. The world is tired. Tired of sirens, tired of loss, tired of leaders playing games with lives they don't live. So instead of waving flags of victory, maybe we should start raising banners of grace. Maybe peace is not about who wins and who loses. Maybe it's about who's willing to stop fighting first. Because history has shown us again and again that forced surrender leads to future resentment, that control breeds rebellion, that silence doesn't always mean agreement, it often just means someone's afraid to speak. But when we create space for dignity even in disagreement, we give peace a chance to grow roots. We give the world something to hope for. So no, unconditional surrender is not the answer. Not if we want peace that lasts. Not if we want healing that's real. Not if we want to look our children in the eyes one day and say, we did better. Let's stop demanding silence from the ones we should be listening to. And let's start building a world where surrender doesn't mean defeat. It means the beginning of understanding. It's easy to confuse the two because from the outside, they can look so similar. Strong words, firm decisions, unshakable tone. But deep inside, there's a quiet difference that separates diplomacy from dominance. And that difference, however small it may seem, can be the line between peace and conflict. Diplomacy listens. Dominance demands. One seeks understanding, the other insists on obedience. One brings people together, the other pushes them to the ground. And when we look at the world today, it feels like we're standing at a crossroads again. Leaders speaking louder, standing taller, but somehow drifting farther from the people they're supposed to serve. We hear speeches filled with threats, declarations, and ultimatums, words meant to show power. But sometimes power that is too loud ends up drowning the very peace it's claiming to protect. Diplomacy is not weakness. It's not indecision. It's not silence. It's knowing that you don't always have to be the loudest voice in the room to be the one that matters most. It's knowing that sometimes peace isn't won through war, but through wisdom. Dominance, on the other hand, is loud, it moves fast, it walks into a room expecting everyone to kneel, it doesn't ask questions, it doesn't wait for answers, it believes that strength means control, and control means fear. But history has shown us over and over again, fear never brings peace. It only postpones the next explosion. And yet we keep repeating the same pattern. We praise those who pound their fists. We admire the ones who say, I will never back down. We cheer for strength, forgetting that true strength isn't just about standing your ground. It's about knowing when to step forward and say, let's talk. Because conversation is not compromise. It's courage. It's easy to dominate. It's easy to say, my way or nothing at all. But it takes real bravery to sit across from someone you don't trust, someone who may have hurt you, and say, tell me why you feel this way. That's where change begins. That's where peace finds a way in. And maybe the reason we struggle so much to choose diplomacy is because it requires patience. It requires humility. It requires leaders to admit that they don't have all the answers. But in a world where power is often measured by how quickly someone can shut down a conversation, diplomacy asks a different question. Can you stay in the room long enough to understand what you've never heard before? Dominance wants results. Fast, final, loud. But diplomacy looks at the long term. It sees beyond the headlines, beyond the press conferences. It sees the mothers waiting for their sons to return, the children praying for silence instead of sirens, the families hoping for tomorrow instead of fearing it. And yes, diplomacy can be frustrating, slow, complex. But every lasting peace the world has ever known started with a conversation table. A few people who chose listening over yelling. And that's the thing. When leaders choose diplomacy, they're not just choosing peace for their generation, they're choosing hope for the next. Dominance may win the moment, but diplomacy wins the future. So we need to stop celebrating those who threaten louder, who point more fingers, who punish first and ask questions later. We need to start looking up to those who pause before speaking, who weigh their words with care, who understand that lives are tied to their tone, that every sentence they speak can either build a bridge or burn one. What if we stopped asking who's in control and started asking who's willing to lead with grace? Because leadership that dominates eventually isolates, but leadership that understands unites. This world has enough divisions, enough battles, enough pain caused by pride. What we need are voices that bring people together, not under control, but under common purpose. We don't need more threats, we need more truth. We don't need more pressure, we need more peace. We don't need more men pounding podiums, we need more hearts willing to soften. And if you've ever felt small in a world full of dominance, just remember, peace doesn't have to shout to be heard. The quietest moments in history were often the most powerful. The ones where a hand was extended instead of a fist, where a letter was written instead of a missile launched, where two enemies sat down not to defeat, but to understand. That's the kind of world we should be building. Not one led by fear, but by wisdom. Not one ruled by force, but by compassion. Because in the end, dominance but diplomacy brings peace. And peace is always the greater victory. You don't see it at first. Because pride wears a suit. It speaks in perfect grammar. It sits behind polished desks and walks confidently through crowded rooms. It talks about strategy, defense, borders, strength. But what it doesn't talk about are the empty chairs at the dinner table, the child waiting for a father who's not coming back, the mother kneeling on the floor, not in prayer, but in grief, the towns that once sang with life and now echo with silence. That's the cost, the real cost, and pride doesn't pay it. People do, regular people, ones who never chose the conflict, never stood behind the podium, never signed anything. But they carry it day after day. And provocation? It's not a direct punch. It's the nudge, the smirk, the let's see what happens if I say this kind of thinking. It's when leaders poke and prod because they believe they can handle the fallout, not realizing that they won't be the ones walking through the wreckage when it all goes wrong. Because it's always someone else. It's the young soldier in a country he doesn't understand. It's the teenager who wanted to go to college but gets handed a weapon instead. It's the grandmother sitting alone, counting the days since the bombing stopped. Pride talks about legacy. Provocation talks about proving a point. But people, they talk about survival. It's easy to make statements on stages, to raise a voice and make bold claims. It makes people clap. It gets the headlines. But behind those headlines are heartlines, lives that get cut short, torn apart, displaced. People who once had dreams and now have only memories. All because someone couldn't back down. Because someone believed that to admit a wrong is to look weak. But I think the opposite is true. Real strength is in restraint. It's in the pause before the punch. It's in choosing peace when pride wants war. We've seen it again and again. History is full of powerful men who provoked until the world burned. And for what? To be remembered? To be feared? To be proven right? There's no medal worth the blood of a child. There's no victory worth the weeping of a mother. There's no headline that's worth a graveyard. And yet, the cycle continues. Because pride whispers, they started it. Provocation says, we'll show them. And people say, we just want to live. I've sat in places where people talk like war is a business deal. like it's numbers, positions, moves, but it's not. It's names, it's faces, it's stories that will never be finished. Every missile has a name we'll never know. Every destroyed home was a place where laughter once lived. Every casualty was someone who mattered to someone. And maybe that's the most painful truth, that pride and provocation are personal to the powerful, but deadly to the powerless. So what do? We remind those in power that their ego has limits, that their decisions ripple far beyond their reach, that pride is not leadership, that provocation is not courage. We remind them that behind every political move there is a person, not a statistic, a soul. It's time we stopped glorifying toughness that destroys and started honoring wisdom that preserves. It takes nothing to push a button, it takes everything to hold back. The human cost of pride and provocation, it's too high. It's not paid in gold, it's paid in lives. And once it's paid, there's no refund, no rewind, no way back to the life that was lost. So, I'll say this as humbly and honestly as I can. The world doesn't need more noise. It doesn't need louder voices or sharper threats. It needs quieter hands, gentler hands, wiser minds. It needs people in power to remember what power is really for. Not to rule over, but to care for. Not to destroy, but to protect. Because at the end of it all, when the cameras are off and the noise fades, what remains isn't the speech or the strategy. What remains are the ones left behind. Somewhere along the way, noise became normal, anger became strategy, and chaos started sounding like leadership. But deep down, we know this isn't the way forward. This isn't the kind of world we want to pass on. Because when all we hear is shouting, who's really listening? There's a stillness that comes when you sit with truth. And truth doesn't need volume. It needs conscience. We don't need more chaos. We need more clarity. We need people, especially the ones in charge, to stop reacting and start reflecting. Because conscience doesn't rush. It considers. It weighs the cost before the move. It sees people, not just, it hears the quiet cries under all the noise. But chaos is loud. It's impulsive. It's driven by pride, by panic, by proving something. It creates division and calls it strategy. It feeds on fear and dresses it up as power. You look around the world and sometimes it feels like the louder someone is, the more attention they get. The more aggressive the stance, the more headlines they earn. But when did chaos become the measure of strength? We're losing something in this race to dominate. We're losing conscience. That quiet inner voice that asks, is this right? Not, is this popular? Not, will it win me votes? But, will this bring peace? Will this protect the innocent? Will this create something good? We need leaders who pause before pushing, who pray before provoking, who understand that real power lies in restraint, not rage. Because anyone can destroy, but it takes courage to build. It takes conviction to say no to conflict. It takes a conscience to choose people over politics. When decisions are made in chaos, people suffer. Not the ones in offices, not the ones writing speeches, but the ones working 2 jobs just to survive. The ones raising kids in a city that suddenly turned into a battlefield. The ones packing their lives into a bag, not because they want to leave, but because they have no choice. They don't need chaos. They need conscience. They need leaders who understand that every decision echoes, that every order carries weight, that every moment of carelessness can become a lifetime of pain for someone they'll never meet. It's not about being perfect. It's about being grounded. It's about choosing the long road of peace over the shortcut of provocation. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to step back. We're in a time where it's easy to react, easy to point fingers, easy to stir the pot. But maybe what we need most is a return to stillness, to conscience, to asking the hard questions in the quiet places. Because real leadership doesn't create chaos to look strong, it creates calm to build strength. So this is a quiet call, not for noise, not for more division, but for conscience. a call to those who hold power. Let your decisions be guided not by headlines, but by heart. Not by chaos, but by character. Because one day, history won't just remember what you did. It will remember why you did it and who paid the price. So, to the leaders of this world, to those sitting in golden chairs, signing treaties and threatening lives, the world is not your chessboard, and we are not your pawns. Speak with purpose, lead with humility, and remember, the loudest voice in the room is not the one that shouts the most. It's the one that speaks truth in the silence. Because true strength is not in threatening to kill a man, it's in choosing to save a world. Thank you.